Imagine the dust of ancient Mesopotamia rising under the sun, the land where civilization itself took its first trembling steps. Around 2,000 years ago, craftsmen molded clay, hammered copper, and forged iron in the valleys of the Tigris. They could not know that one of their humble jars, buried and forgotten, would one day ignite one of the greatest mysteries in archaeology, the mystery of the Baghdad Battery. In the 1930s, near Baghdad, workers excavating ancient tombs discovered a small clay pot about the size of a hand. Inside it was something strange, a copper cylinder rolled from a thin sheet with an iron rod fitted inside, all sealed with asphalt at the top. It didn't look like anything else found from that period. Archaeologists sent it to the museum in Baghdad, where it sat for a while unnoticed until one man looked closer. Wilhelm König, an Austrian archaeologist, examined the artifact and proposed a theory that would electrify the world, literally. He suggested that the jar could be an ancient battery, capable of generating electricity if filled with an acidic liquid such as vinegar or grape juice. Copper, iron, and acid form the basic ingredients of a simple galvanic cell. To König, it seemed plausible that ancient people might have stumbled upon this principle, perhaps while trying to preserve metals or experiment with alchemy. That idea of electricity existing in the ancient world spread like wildfire. Scientists, historians, and adventurers alike were captivated. Could the people of the Parthian or Sassanian empires have known how to harness electric current? If true, it would change everything we thought we knew about technological history. Replicas were built, and the results were surprising. When reconstructed using similar materials, the jar did indeed produce a small electric current, just under 1 volt. Connecting several in series could yield a few volts, enough to give a light shock or possibly electroplate a thin layer of metal onto another surface. Suddenly, the impossible seemed not so far-fetched. And so, the Baghdad Battery entered the legend of the so-called OO-parts, out-of-place artifacts that appear to defy historical logic. Like the Antikythera mechanism, it seemed to whisper that the ancients may have been far more advanced than we give them credit for. But as with all good mysteries, not everyone agreed. Skeptical archaeologists argued that there was no clear evidence that the jar had ever been used to produce electricity. They pointed out that no wires, connectors, or electrical instruments had been found near it. The finds context was poorly recorded, no detailed excavation notes, no photographs of its original position. Without that, speculation filled the void. Some experts suggested that the jar was not a battery at all, but a simple storage vessel for scrolls or sacred documents. Similar clay jars from the same region were found containing rolled papyri. The copper could have served as a protective casing, and the asphalt seal to keep out moisture. What later looked like an electrical setup might simply have been a coincidence of design. Others proposed it had ritual or symbolic significance. In some cultures, copper and iron were believed to possess spiritual energy. The jar, sealed and mysterious, could have been used in a religious ceremony, perhaps even producing small shocks through contact with the acidic content, interpreted by participants as divine power. And so the debate began. Was this a tool of science or an object of faith? To understand the controversy, imagine the world of the Parthians or Sassanians. They were masters of metalwork, glass, and architecture. They used complex chemical techniques for tanning, dyeing, and preserving materials. It's not impossible that they might have discovered by accident that certain metals and liquids could interact to create a tingling sensation, a spark of curiosity, perhaps literally. But then comes the silence. If they had truly understood electricity, where are the other devices? Where are the lamps, the wires, the circuits, the texts describing electric principles? None exist. There is no chain of evidence to suggest a technological lineage. One jar alone, without supporting context, is not enough to rewrite history. And yet, there's something haunting about it, because possibility, once imagined, refuses to die. Modern experimenters have shown that the Baghdad Battery design, if filled with acidic juice, can generate a voltage. It's enough to electroplate small items with gold or silver in laboratory conditions. It's enough to make a person feel a faint jolt on their skin. It's enough to suggest that maybe, just maybe, someone, somewhere, knew what they were doing. Imagine an ancient artisan in a dimly lit workshop. He dips his copper wire into a small jar filled with vinegar. He touches it to an iron tool and feels a spark, a tingle, a sense of power from within the clay. Maybe he smiles. Maybe he tells no one. Maybe it's a secret lost in the sands of time. But then there's another possibility. The battery as metaphor, not mechanism. Maybe it represents the spark of curiosity itself, the timeless human urge to experiment, to combine materials and see what happens. Even if it was never meant to be a source of power, its discovery has charged our imagination for nearly a century. As the decades passed, more jars of similar form were reportedly found near Baghdad, though not all identical. Some contained no metal components, others were damaged. Without the complete set of archaeological data, certainty became impossible. When war and looting struck the region in the early 2000s, many museum artifacts, including the Baghdad Battery, vanished. What remains today are replicas, photographs, and controversy. Still, the mystery lives on, because the idea is too beautiful to abandon. It challenges the arrogance of modernity, the assumption that progress moves in a straight line. What if knowledge rises and falls like tides? What if ancient civilizations discovered principles of science that were later lost, only to be rediscovered millennia later? The Baghdad Battery becomes a symbol of that cyclical view of history, the notion that human genius has always existed, flickering in unexpected corners. When we speak of the Baghdad Battery, we are really speaking about the limits of our imagination. Our ancestors were not as ignorant as we often assume. They observed, experimented, and invented, guided by intuition as much as reason. Whether the jar was a primitive battery or simply a ritual vessel, it embodies the same essence, the marriage of curiosity and craft. Even the skeptics, when pressed, admit that the design is unusual. Why roll a copper sheet into a tube, insert an iron rod, and seal it with asphalt? Why go to such lengths if the jar's purpose was merely to store something simple? The question remains suspended, unanswered, and perhaps that's why it fascinates us so deeply. We live in a world where every mystery demands a solution, yet the Baghdad Battery resists full explanation. It sits between worlds, between science and myth, history and imagination. If it was a battery, it suggests forgotten experiments with electrochemistry thousands of years before Volta's pile. If it wasn't, it reminds us how easily the human mind reaches for meaning, how we weave stories to fill the gaps left by time. Either way, it holds power, the power to make us wonder. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe an artisan noticed that mixing certain metals with sour wine produced strange effects and used it for curiosity or ritual without understanding the underlying physics. In that sense, the Baghdad Battery could be both, a scientific phenomenon born out of spiritual exploration. In storytelling form, you can almost picture it. A temple chamber glows in torchlight. A priest dips a metal figurine into a small jar. Sparks faintly shimmer as a crowd gasps. The gods speak through light, someone whispers. The ritual feels divine, but what if it was chemistry, not magic? What if belief and science were one and the same? That's the deeper beauty of the Baghdad Battery. It blurs the line between faith and knowledge. It shows that the human drive to understand the universe has always existed, even when clothed in mystery or ritual. When we look at that clay jar today, we see more than an object. We see a question that refuses to die. Could ancient people have touched the power of electricity long before Benjamin Franklin flew his kite, before Volta built his pile, before Faraday spun his coils? Or is the entire idea a product of our modern obsession with retrofitting the past into our own image? The answer may never be known. The artifact's context is gone, its origin debated, its contents long evaporated. But its story continues to travel the world, retold in classrooms, documentaries, and late-night conversations among the curious. Perhaps that's its true power, not to light a lamp, but to ignite imagination. The Baghdad Battery reminds us that history is full of mysteries waiting to be rediscovered, that every broken pot and corroded rod could hold secrets about the nature of human ingenuity. It teaches humility. For all our technology, we still dig in the earth and find things we cannot explain. We still argue, still dream, still wonder. And so, the clay jar from Baghdad remains a silent riddle. Maybe it never powered anything, or maybe it once lit a spark that flickered and died. Either way, it continues to power something far greater, the curiosity of those who dare to ask. If you found this story fascinating, if you believe that some mysteries are worth keeping alive, subscribe and join the journey through the hidden chapters of history. Because somewhere out there, buried beneath centuries of dust, there might be another jar waiting to be found, another spark from the past, ready to remind us that the line between science and magic is thinner than we think.